Welcome, everyone. My name is Solomon Din. I wanted to give you a warm welcome, especially to the operations experts who are interested in leveling up their execution so you can drive your firm's overall growth. I know you'll get lots of insights from today's event, Operational Excellence, tightening up your team's execution. So, just move to my screen here. Sorry about that. So let me take you through today's discussion today. I wanted to first of all note that we have for our agenda, we'll first have actionable perspectives from our expert panelists. We'll then have technology demos to show you tools that can help you further your operational excellence. And finally, attendees will receive a package of resources, including the presentation, for reference and sharing among colleagues. Our presentation today, our conversation today is presented by Advisor Engine and Nitrogen. Advisor Engine delivers a complete wealth management platform, including CRM and portfolio management, as well as other modules to help you run a better RIA. Nitrogen, which recently rebranded Beyond Risk, is a platform dedicated to helping advisor practices achieve new levels of growth. So I'm going to be moderating today's expert panel, and I know everyone here is focused on making the session filled with concrete points and takeaways. So I have the pleasure, first of all, of introducing John O'Connell. John is the head of industry consulting firm, the Oasis Group. And I think he's named that because he's seen just about every advisor tech challenge under the sun. His 30 years of industry experience includes leadership roles at Merrill Lynch, KPMG, and Oracle. John's also been the president of a fintech firm and held C-level customer-facing roles at two global publicly traded companies. Also joining us today is Nick Harding. He's the Senior Vice President of Advisor Care and Success at Nitrogen, and I know he's been an integral part of the team there since joining in 2015. Nick frequently represents Nitrogen at conferences and events across the country, providing financial advisors with tools and ideas to align the world's investments with each investor's risk number. And I know Nick will expand upon that work. He's also a builder and a kid at heart, and that's why he enjoys spending his time with family, especially building Legos with his son. And finally, welcome to Craig Ramsey. Craig's career has included leadership roles in corporate strategy, management consulting, and investment banking. But what he's most passionate about is business building and getting stuff done. And that's a good thing because that's how he spends his time here every day at Advisor Engine. As Chief Operating Officer, Craig leads the company's executive management committee that keeps the organization humming. Welcome to you all, gentlemen. Thank you so much for joining us in our conversation today.
Great to be here.
Thanks for having us.
No, thank you. First of all, just very quickly for the audience, we break our conversation into 3 easy to follow steps. In this case, taking stock, building a plan, and executing. So we're going to get into the discussion, and before I do that, I'm going to switch my screens here. I have a poll that I'd like to just push to the audience for all who are attending to just sort of get their sense on a question that we have regarding operational excellence. And this poll is just very simply to get a sense of whether you have a written definition of operational excellence at your firm. So we'll take a quick moment here. It's very interesting from what I'm seeing, the quick results right now. The majority of those listening who have joined us as attendees do not have a written definition of operational excellence. So I know this is going to be a really interesting topic. I think John, I'm going to go to you with the first question that we've developed as a group here for our discussion today. It's sort of 80%. From what I can see, I'm going to close the poll. They say not yet. They do not have a written definition of operational excellence. So with that, John, could we, if I could go to you first, if you could explain a little bit of the thinking behind this first question that we have in regards to taking stock.
Absolutely. So, and thanks again for having me.
if you take a look at how do you take stock with operational excellence, how do you get your hands kind of wrapped around this? I think the first thing you need to ask yourself is, what do you want to measure in the company and why, right? So a great example is we've got some firms that we work with that primarily they're getting a lot of their business through referrals, right? They're not doing lead generation. So if that's the case, some of the things you may want to take a look at are, how efficient are you in being able to gather information to create your initial financial plan, to present that to your referral prospect, and then win the business, right? So what information are you gathering up front? That could be as simple as, do you have a checklist of information that you're trying to gather in the beginning of, of the process of the sales cycle, if you will? So in a lot of cases, your advisor will have a conversation with the prospective client, and then you're going to try to gather a ton of that information. One thing you should look at from an operational excellence perspective is, does the advisor need to gather that info, or can another team member gather that information? Is this an opportunity for you to introduce other team members really early to the client so that the client understands it's not just me as your advisor, I have an entire team, a company that stands behind me that's going to help you to be successful, right? So you really, the first thing I would do is take stock of what are you doing in your business today and what do you want to measure to drive excellence. If you're a referral business, how can I measure things like my cycle time from the moment I start a conversation with a referral to the moment I've opened accounts and funded those accounts, right? Because you generate revenue when you fund an account in many cases, if you're an AUM-based firm, for example. So what's my cycle time along that? And then once you understand that cycle time, then you can start breaking that down to, is this a business operations perspective that I want to take? Do I want to measure something in business ops? Do I want to measure my client onboarding experience, in which case it's client operations? Do I want to measure how quickly I'm able and how successfully I'm able to transfer the money over, whether that's ACATS or the funding account, in which case that could be an investment operations discussion. Or are you a firm that's out there with young advisors generating leads and trying to build a bigger book of the business? In which case, you can start measuring things along that entire sales cycle from lead to qualified prospect. So I think the first step, when we work with firms, the first step we do is we sit down and listen to, what's your current processes look like? What do you measure, if anything? In many cases, a lot of firms are like the folks on this poll, where most of them are not measuring things. And then we make suggestions. What should we begin measuring first? And that's going to drive a whole host of other decisions around what technology you're choosing, what kind of reporting do you want to do around measuring this? So there's a whole host of things you're going to drive around that discussion.
Craig,
if you're not measuring anything, then the reality of it is you're probably not getting consistent results. Any scientist will tell you in the scientific method, I measure it. I measure. Why? Because I want to generate predictable result sets. And if you're not measuring anything, you're probably going to have a lot of variability in the results that you're getting with each individual client and across each one of your advisors.
Thank you, John. Craig, that kind of really ties into sort of the first actionable item, and I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about that.
Sure, happy to, Suleiman. So in line with what John just said, what I've found, whether it's within my own experience at companies or when we work with advisory firms, is that the first thing you got to do is get aligned on definition so we don't talk past one another. So I would say consider what operational excellence looks like. And the first thing in that is defining your firm's operations categories. So if you flip, Suleiman, I know we worked on this together. These categories come from working with advisory firms. These are some common areas that we're seeing people define. And when I say that, by the way, it doesn't mean you have a whole person that's fully dedicated to this, or certainly not a department, depending on your scale, although it could. What's important about this is that we go beneath just the general definition of ops or operations and really look at what are we trying to get done with it, and then we can look at what we can measure. So in our experience, we see first is business ops. So often that is the highest level, it's revenue, it's profitability, and the like. How do you run your company in business ops? Client ops, that's a common one that I think is probably the most native to a lot of people joining the call. It's all of our client experience items, all of our client service standards to make sure that we're really delivering the advice standard that we want to with our wealth management clients. Third is investment ops. So some firms will call this portfolio ops, some firms will call this planning and investment ops. But the point is, this is all the actions that have to take place around putting money to work and building a plan. And then finally, is a category that is more of an emerging one. I'm seeing more and more RIAs implement this one, whereas if you go back 5 years ago, I don't think I heard anybody calling it this, was around growth ops. So that's all the systems and processes around marketing and sales that are oriented towards revenue growth. And lastly, the piece up here on other, depending on the nature of your business, you may have other ways you want to think about it. We see some of our clients have a dedicated data ops function as they get more mature. We see tech ops, we see people ops or HR. So the important thing is, I think with people on the call, is that you have a definition for these so that when you're meeting with your leadership team, you're able to just tightly get to the point, figure out what you want to measure in each of these categories. And I would end by saying, if you really want to put this into action, I'd encourage you to actually look at the etymology of the word operation. So if you Google where that comes from, I'll wait so you can do it yourself, but it ties to that phrase, singing from the same sheet of music. If you look up where the Latin root of operations, if you're a business nerd like me, you might find it interesting. But point being, Suleiman, I think John, Nick, and I have all seen many cases where firms have good intentions on operations, but if you don't discreetly break them out and be crisp on what you mean, you won't get to that tight level of execution that you want to see.
Yeah, and that brings up, I wanted to just quickly, since we have these categories up here, I wanted to launch another poll for the audience. If you have identified somebody, a responsible person for any of the following areas, whether it's client ops, investment ops, growth ops, or business ops. So we'll take another couple of seconds here and get some results from that. But it's what's interesting, what I'm seeing a majority here sort of fluctuating between clients ops and investments ops. So growth is one of those categories that doesn't have as many people or at least folks who are individually responsible sort of dedicated to that area. That's really interesting. So a lot of focus on that client operations, but growth. And I know that we're going to talk about that, how growth and operations go hand in hand here. So let me go back to, I'll close this poll here. We'll go back to our screen. Craig, if I could just continue, where does it, since, client operations obviously surfaced as a major focus. So there definitely folks in the audience are trying, or at least have this understanding that you have to start with the clients.
Absolutely. So I know Nick, John, and I, all three of us are passionate about this topic because if you're, here you go, some nice survey results, I see, Suleiman.
Yep.
And in line with that, before you get to those areas I just mentioned, it's really important to take a look at the flow. So how do you turn your prospects into clients? How do you turn your clients into loyal advocates or raving fans? And those points along the journey, as you reflect on those, it can expose some areas where you're strong and areas where you might have gaps along this. And so those areas we just talked about should really map to this piece. And it also speaks to technology too. So your tech stack lining right up to your operations model so that those touch points along the client journey are consistent. Nick, John, and I have all worked together with different firms on this exact piece where you get in together, you look at what you think your client journey is and then what it really is, and when real life gets involved. And I find that's always a really fun exercise to do, at the very least on an annual basis, on where do we think we are on the client journey mapping and how our operating model and tech maps to that versus where we really are.
Yeah. Nick, I want to turn to you because I know that Nitrogen, they did this recent study that noted amongst many of the interesting findings that the greatest barrier, even whether it's high performing firms, low performing or slow growth firms, converting a prospect to a client, the greatest barrier there is that if the business does not have processes in place. I think that ties very nicely to this second kind of, actionable item about gathering inputs and really having that process in place to gather those inputs.
Absolutely, really appreciate it. One of the things we find with our own business as well as with advisors is just identifying kind of what we've talked about here. Where are those gaps that are keeping you up at night, right? Like I like to use the sleep test. If there's something that's keeping me up or waking me up in the middle of the night, I know that's the part to start with. And I think for anybody who's new to this, because I know in some of the polls that we did here,
people are like, this is a new concept for me. So I would just recommend, and I think, my panelists of Craig and John would agree, focus on like maybe 2 to 3 areas that are the most relevant for you right now. You don't have to boil the whole ocean right now. Just pick those top 2 to 3 areas and really gather some inputs from those around you, from your team. I think your team is going to be a great indicator of what isn't working, right? And you can take all that data down and put some of it on like a someday maybe list if you want, but gather those and then stack rank them to identify what is the most important now. We're going to talk a little bit more about that, but just make sure you're gathering all the information so you can make the wisest decision as you go along. And we were talking about talking with stakeholders. Sometimes that's going to be your own team. Sometimes that can be your clients. If you have a couple of clients that are pretty close to you, that you feel like you have that rapport with, you can say, hey, what would be 2 to 3 things we could do better to serve you? Really open-ended. A lot of people like to give their advice and give their opinion, so you don't want to make it too open-ended to where they're going to drive your whole business. But I think that's a really cool thing that you can do with those folks, and it helps solidify the relationship at the same time. We were talking about assessing your challenges and blind spots, and one of the areas that you can do that with is something called a SWOT analysis. That stands for strengths, weaknesses, operations, and threats. And you can pick any of these areas that we talked about, any of the 5 areas, as well as any other ones. I know like in our business, literally today, we had an area pop up that it's only going to be an area of operational focus for about 90 days, and then it's going to disappear just due to a specialized project for now. So we did kind of a quick SWOT analysis. What are our strengths as we go into this? What are those things that we're ready for? What are some weaknesses? What are some opportunities to kind of get ahead and even develop more of that skill? And what are some threats that could make this whole thing go sideways? So I think those are some areas that you can focus in on. That's a really useful tool, and it's one I think we've all used and done pretty well with. So appreciate it.
Nick, before we go into the second point, just quickly, I know Nitrogen is part of that study, that looked at, high growth firms versus slow growth firms. Any particular, starting points from an operations perspective that you guys saw in your survey, or that would kind of be relevant for the RA audience, for folks who are in ops? Like where you mentioned breaking off some of those challenges. Any particular places that you've seen that firms commonly are going to solve?
I think one of the ones that we saw was in onboarding, but also it's the end-to-end process, making sure you don't have silos on your teams. So one of the things that we were talking about was process can be kind of your best friend as you're working on all of this, where you want it to be you want to create a very delightful opportunity for your clients. But at the end of the day, every time you have a handoff is an opportunity to drop the ball, right? So kind of everything we've been talking about so far is making sure it's a smooth transition, creating a very delightful opportunity for your clients at the end of the day, so that they'll, stay paying refers, the old adage goes. So yeah. I think that would be what we would recommend, is identify what are those areas, because a solid process doesn't just serve your customers in creating a delightful opportunity, it also helps on things like the compliance side. Because if you do the same thing with every client in terms of the intake questions, what you're doing to make sure all of your regulatory boxes are checked, you get to not only sleep better at night because everyone's taken care of, but your clients are taken care of, they feel taken care of, and then you obviously have that from a compliance standpoint as well.
Right. Craig, let me go to you. We've been talking about processes and obviously gathering inputs. Could you talk a little bit about the question that we've developed for the second section on building a plan?
Absolutely, Solomon. So in my experience, a lot of times firms will go through annual planning and everybody gets excited about the goals you want to hit. And then real life gets in the way and people don't really build out the how of the plan. And so with operations in particular, I would challenge this group of all of us on the call today to really push ourselves to look at what changes do we need to make to enable the growth goals for 2024 and beyond. I find that now is actually a really good time. This time of the year, post Labor Day, everybody's really hitting it in the business, and the end of the year can sneak up on you. So as you're doing the planning, making sure that you're really stress testing the plan to make sure you can scale and be proud of the advice that you're delivering as you hit those growth goals. Thinking about that beforehand. As we all know, it's harder to change once something starts. So making your system stronger, your processes stronger, and then leveling up your team too, as you mentioned, as you envision what your company really looks like as you hit your growth goals and beyond.
John, from the consulting side, what are some of the growth goals that you're hearing from firms right now?
You know, it depends on the firm. I mean, a lot of the firms that we're dealing with are kind of in two different camps, right? One of the firms that have kind of broken away recently, and they're really trying to figure out of all of this advisor technology, what should they implement and what's going to really help them to grow the best. And then the second camp is this group that, you know, invest a lot of money in advisor technology, and now they're trying to drive more advisor productivity, or they're trying to drive better cost, better margins per client. So in both of those instances, really, there's some commonality in the problem set, right? So, you know, we're a big fan of leveraging things like a Moscow list, a must-have, should-have, could-have, and won't-have list to try to formulate people's thoughts around their goals, right? So a lot of the firms that we talk to are using either EOS, the Entrepreneurial Operating System, right? Or they're beginning to put together rocks on a quarterly basis, right? Goals that they've got for each quarter. But they've got to go one layer below that. And that's sometimes where they struggle is, so I've got this goal, this rock for this quarter. How do I then operationalize that? How do I actually have the tasks that I need to do to drive that success? And I think, you know, the Moscow list from our perspective helps them quite a bit on that. Because number one, the Moscow list can work not only for the goal setting, but also, you know, if you can institutionalize the use of that, you can use it for everything like, hey, I want to go get a new set of technology. This is what I must have in that technology for me to be successful. Here's what I should have. Here's what could be there, which would be kind of nice. And here's what I definitely do not want to have there, right? But around the goal setting, really just kind of documenting your goals out and putting an individual owner to each one of them. You know, part of this, the materials that people can access after this is going to be a Moscow list template. And you're going to see in that template, there's a specific owner for each one of the Moscow items. And having that individual owner drives an accountability level across your entire team, so that that team member knows, I'm accountable for this. I've got to make this happen. You know, laying out the planned activities in a short project plan could be great. I mean, you don't have to go out and get a Microsoft project and get a, you know, a PMP, a certified project manager, to go build this. It could be as simple as, let me get something stood up in like a Monday.com or like a ClickUp, or, you know, you can even do it in Excel. Anything that where you have defined dates. So you've got defined individuals that own it. You've got a defined date of when they want to hit it. You understand what your dependencies are. And then the Moscow template itself can drive things around the new capabilities and the spend required for it. But I do think getting organized around some sort of project plan, whether you use a Moscow template, whether you use, you know, a light project planning capability, having defined tasks with defined owners and defined timelines is what's going to help you to drive success.
Yeah, Solomon, and John and Nick, I don't know if you've seen this, but in the last kind of 18 to 24 months, I'm seeing a lot more firms bringing up EOS proactively. So before that, I wasn't hearing it as much. So I would say on the call, if you haven't read that book, it's called Traction. I do think it's a really nice book as you're looking to grow your firm and look at some of these operational excellence items. So it's a book I'd recommend, and it's interesting in the RA market. I'm just seeing it recently come up a lot more.
Yep, absolutely. We're seeing it pretty much everywhere at this point in the RIA space.
There's a question here I see too that's asking about the what is the Moscow Russia comment you're talking. John, can you unpack a Moscow list one more time for people?
A Moscow list is a must-have, should have, could have, and won't have list. The must-haves are, if we don't have this capability, the entire project will not be successful, right? That must-have list should be relatively small and manageable. Should-haves are, if we have the ability to deliver this, then it's a bonus, right? These are the capabilities we should be looking for within a solution, whether that's a piece of software, a new process flow, whatever. This is what we should have in here. Could-haves are opportunities where, if you have time in the project, if you've achieved your musts and your should, you can move on to your could-haves. Or a lot of times you get slack time in a project. In other words, we're waiting for someone to deliver something else to us. We're waiting for a data feed, as a great example from our custodian. While you're waiting for something like that, you can examine those could-haves and say, is there something that I could do really quickly here, right? And then your won't-haves are really important, because a lot of times when you get into a project, people don't define specifically what's outside of the scope of that project. And that's where you get what we call scope creep. In other words, Well, my scope started off with these 10 things that we needed to deliver, but then special snowflakes started coming up from different departments. A special snowflake is, I can't use the software unless I have this one thing. Well, the one thing you'd like, but it not everyone in the entire the entire organization needs that. That's a special snowflake. If you can take those special snowflakes and hear the fact that a person wants it, you specifically put that in a could or a won't category within the Moscow list, that's usually very effective because you're hearing the requirement, you're categorizing that requirement based on the needs of the many and not the needs of the few or the one, and you're putting that into a could or a won't category. So Moscow is just literally just an acronym for this list of must, should, could, and won't. It's an easy way to remember that.
And I think Nick, you've got another acronym to share with the audience here, especially in this fifth point about identifying quick wins to drive momentum.
Absolutely, because what we find, and that survey really points it out a lot there, Solomon, is there's a difference between whether you want to grow or initiate hypergrowth. And this idea of operational excellence ties into that because you have to have that foundation to streamline efficiencies and effectiveness, or else you're just not going to grow. Like we can just throw people at it, but that's really expensive and that has a limitation to it. So some of what we're talking about here will help you grow faster, more effectively, and kind of guide the growth. So one of the things to identify is, hey, what does a quick win look like? We call that an MVP or a minimum viable product. We use that a lot in software of, hey, we've got this grandiose idea to create something, but what's the minimum thing that we need to actually ship or deliver within the next 30 days, or specify the time frame that works for you, that can help us test whether or not this is the best direction to go. And I know it seems like we have it all figured out in the software game or whatever we're doing, but a lot of times you have to kind of test it within the market and test it within the application to make sure, hey, is this what is actually going to meet that need? Is this going to address what we're going to address? And so having those goals and everything identified, but really focusing on that minimum viable product. And the other thing that I thought would be really good to mention is a lot of times it can feel like, especially from an analytical perspective, listen, we've got a plan, we've got to analyze, and then we'll execute. One of the things to just kind of embrace here is find that thing that you can, instead of ready, fire, aim, you can fire and then ready and aim again to iterate forward on it. So that idea of create the minimum viable product that you can ship quickly to test out your assumptions. It reminds me of a story when I was in my younger years when I had hair, Craig. But in my younger years, I worked for a millionaire and I was doing some analysis for him. We're talking hours upon hours of spreadsheets. I put them in front of him, the best of the best, and in less than 2 minutes, he told me that all the analysis didn't pan out. It wasn't going to pencil. And I said, how did you know that after 2 minutes? He said, because it didn't pencil on the back of the napkin. It's that same idea. A minimum viable product is the back of the napkin idea that you use sometimes in your analysis and things like that. So there you go.
That's a really fascinating anecdote, Nick, and I wanted to stay with you then, because obviously, so I just wanted to note one stat here. In Kitces, they estimated the average RA is spending a cumulative almost 17 hours of direct client activity time per client each year. So I think we're coming into this, stretch between resources, time allotment, projects in hand, needing to complete them. So I guess this question, of what hurdles that will stand in the way of executing, if you could talk a little bit about that from your perspective.
Absolutely, just a few that come to my mind. Obviously, we kind of led into it with the analysis by paralysis, and that could be a really good time if you're not sure where to start. Go back to that Moscow list that John really highlighted of, let's just focus on our must-haves. What do we absolutely need to have? Pick the top 2 or 3 that we've stack ranked. That could be a great way to overcome the hurdles. You can feel like finances or time really are impacting you, and that's again where you're going to want to highlight what are our must-haves and how do we incorporate that minimum viable idea or that back of the napkin idea to figure out, can we test something that only takes us an hour to implement in terms of a process, or maybe it's a spreadsheet or a Google Doc or whatever the case might be. And I think that Craig had a couple of ideas here as well.
Yep. Yeah, Craig, if we could talk a little bit about some of the action items in our.
Sure. So this is an area I'm definitely passionate about. I don't think you can have operational excellence unless you really weave it into your company culture and list your full company in that push. Operational excellence isn't just the operations team doing it. It's really got to be the full company. One example for how we've done that at Advisor Engine, that we've worked actually with a couple RIAs to do this at a light level, is really refining our values. So what we did, we got our exec team together at an offsite. We really looked at our company values and made sure we had the right words down, and we came up with 5 C's. They all happen to start with C, and then the rest of the company, we put it to the full organization, then we came up with a 6th. The reason I think those are important is because we can use those words to hold each other accountable and push each other. So if you ask a team member, typically they can rattle them off pretty quickly: camaraderie, curiosity, clarity, creativity, crushing it, and celebration. Those are things that if you're at an organization and your values are a little bit hollow, like, hey, we stuck the word integrity on a glossy poster on the wall, that's not what I'm talking about. I mean words you can use with each other to push one another to make sure you're doing what you say you're going to do and living up to those values. And operational excellence, I think, is really tied to that.
John, I mean, there's a question about keeping people to task. Could you talk a little about some of the things that you've seen work for firms to make sure that the plan is actually executed, the stuff gets done?
Absolutely. I mean, you've got to have someone accountable for the execution of the plan, right? That doesn't have to be a formal project manager. That could be a project coordinator, but it needs to be someone that brings everyone that's associated with the project together on a periodic basis, right? When I say a periodic basis, I typically like to see projects meet on a weekly basis. If you've got a really crisp agenda, you can get through an entire weekly update on a project in about 30 minutes. You don't have to book an entire hour and eat up an hour of everyone's time. Start with 30 minutes, get through it crisply. If you don't get through the whole project update in 30 minutes, everyone's going to understand that that's an important call, and they're going to come to the next call even more prepared, right? And sometimes you've got projects like Nick, you had mentioned the project that it's going to be a quick hit, right? A 90-day type of a project that you're going to try to execute on. For projects that are really quick that you need to execute upon and you need to be really, really tight on, don't be afraid to meet more than once a week and have those meetings be, again, really crisp. In the development world, Nick had mentioned, from an MVP perspective, there's another thing called daily stand-ups. And the daily stand-up is like a 15-minute meeting where the whole team gets together and talks about, these are the problems that I have, this is what I need help with, and you can rally around that together to solve that problem. Don't be afraid if a project starts to go slightly sideways to say, instead of weekly calls, we're going to move to 15-minute daily stand-ups, right? Or every other day, we're going to do a Monday, Wednesday, Friday daily stand-up, or a Tuesday, Thursday daily stand-up, and help those other team members that are struggling to either A, drive to its decision, or B, maybe you've got a team member that just needs a little bit more help to get the ball over the goal line. Yeah. Just rally around them, and the daily stand-up or the weekly meetings are a key way to do that. 90% of the time when a project fails, it was a communication problem. The project lingered for too long. The problem got too big for someone to solve, and then a project fails. Even when you look at technology projects that fail, most of the time they're not failing because the technology didn't work. They're failing because the implementation didn't work. So if you can rally around that, you'll have a much more successful project, whether that's a tech project, an operational change project, a brand new workflow that you're going to put in place. It kind of doesn't matter what the project is. That meeting often, communicating effectively, not oversaturating people with meetings is going to be key.
Yeah. Nick, one very, very quick question to you, and then we'll segue into the next part of our session here. But any technology that you've found useful to help keep your team accountable?
I think we've used some of those technological ideas that John had mentioned. We use a couple different project management tools, but honestly, I'm a fan of the oldies or the goodies, right? So going back to some of those classics like 1 Minute Manager, High Output Management, Atomic Habits even. So one of the ones that we've used a lot is, as we're trying to tackle making something better, we're asking ourselves not how do we get the whole thing done all at once, but how do we take that elephant one bite at a time, as the old adage goes, and just work on getting 1% better every day, like it says in Atomic Habits. So really finding those avenues where we can get it done quickly. And again, I love that idea of the daily stand-up. In that meeting that I mentioned today, we did 2 things. We did daily stand-ups and we did a dedicated communication track. We use Slack for that. That's a technology we use to help kind of expedite speed of communication. And we have a dedicated channel that we also know will have an end life as will those stand-ups. So it's a very short run piece, but it's one that we have to have a tight rein on it. And those are really great pieces that you can incorporate. And they don't take very long to stand up, no pun intended. So, yeah.
And
Well, with
one other quick point, if I may, Nick bringing up an excellent point. Whatever communication channel you're going to choose, make sure that all the communication is in there. Do not have communication that's in email and then other stuff that's in Slack or Teams or the project plan. Whatever you're going to pick, you can have two, by the way. You can have like the project plan in Slack or the project plan in email. But whatever you're going to pick, make sure that all the communication happens in one place so that people, again, don't feel like they're left out of an email trail or they don't think they were involved in a decision. That will cause a lot of delays in your project. So Nick, I'm glad you brought that up. I think it's critical to make sure you've got a good communication vehicle, and there's only one of them.
Yeah, we're going to actually turn it over right now to our colleagues at Nitrogen and Advisor Engine. Joining us are Alex Wiens and Kathy Crowley. They're going to talk a little bit about some of the operational excellence tools that both the Advisor Engine and Nitrogen offer for operations experts on the call here to, again, further that operational excellence and help them support the growth strategies of the overall firms. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Alex from Nitrogen.
Awesome. Thank you very much. Let me get my presentation started here. All right. Confirmation this is coming through okay?
Yeah, we can see it. Thank you, Alex.
Awesome. Great. Well, I appreciate being invited here. Thank you very much. My name is Alex Wiens. I am the Managing Director of Sales for the West Coast here at Nitrogen. Been here for 9 years. I've seen a lot of the changes, obviously here for the rebrand from Riskalyze to Nitrogen. I'm going to go through what we call the core four today to keep with the theme of operational excellence and using the Nitrogen workflow as a standardized process for really primarily working with prospects, but I can touch on how advisors are using it for current clients as well. So to start off, these risk numbers look like speed limit signs on purpose. Advisors are using Nitrogen and these risk numbers to quantify the best interest of the clients and prospects. The best one-liner I have for this product is that it is a sales tool hidden in plain sight behind the practice of great advice. And that's because what we're doing here for this sample prospect, Doug and Diane, they want to be a risk 63. They're currently invested down the road with another advisor at an 84 with a low GPA. I'll touch on that. We're proposing something better, and then we'll use the retirement map as light financial planning to prove to them that we're got the ship headed in the right direction. So we'll start with the first of the core four, which is going to be risk tolerance. When I head over here to the risk number, the risk number is a scale from 1 to 99. 1 is cash, 99 is like throwing everything you got at Bitcoin and crossing your fingers. So there's a lot of room in between those numbers. For Doug, he took a questionnaire. For time's sake, I'm going to skip the questionnaire today, but I'd be happy to take anybody through a sample. He's a risk 51 on that scale of 1 to 99, and that 51 means that he's comfortable risking about 10% or about $90,000 of his $900,000 portfolio. Our definition of risk tolerance is how far can your portfolio fall in a fixed period of time before you would capitulate and make an emotionally charged, poor investing decision. You know, where's the line in the sand where Doug says, you know what, I'd rather go to cash than continue to watch the value of my portfolio fall. And the meat and potatoes question we ask in that questionnaire is, how much risk can you stomach in the next 6 months out of your 900,000? He said 90,000, so that's where he lands at 10% or a 51. Diane is a little bit more comfortable with risk, so she landed as a 66. She's cool with about 14% or $125,000 of that same $900,000 portfolio. And so between 10 and 14, the average is obviously 12. But hey, we know this is a little bit of art. It's a little bit of science. So you might know that Diane really does call the shots as far as the finances are concerned. So maybe you want to click this closer to her risk number, throw some notes in there, and confirm that. So we'll do that now. By the way, I know Kathy will show some of this, but this will push over to Advisor Engine and a lot of the other integrations we have as well. The magic behind Nitrogen, if you will, is being able to take that quantified risk tolerance and score it apples to apples against the portfolio that the client or the prospect has. So in this example, Doug and Diane, they want to be a 63 and they're invested like an 84. We make them look like speed limit signs on purpose. And obviously this is set up for some dramatic effect, but they're 21 points over, right? Their portfolio is going way too fast with the stomach that they have for risk. We ingest data from Morningstar and some other sources with each individual investment's return, volatility, and correlation data. So we actually refresh our data every single day with daily price history. So today's got yesterday's market close. And that separates us from the pack because most other softwares out there that analyze portfolios do generalize by asset class. So they would call Twitter and Apple large cap tech stocks and generalize risk and reward from there. I'm sure people on the call know that these are two very differently performing stocks, and so we treat them as such. All that is wrapped up with this 95% probability or historical range, capturing roughly 2 standard deviations from the mean of what would be normal for this portfolio to do in a 6-month time frame. I know there was a lot of math there, but backing up to how to use this, advisors are using this to set expectations of, hey, it would be normal for your portfolio, Doug and Diane, with the advisor you got down the road, to land somewhere between down about 20% and up 24%. Again, they're cool with about 13 as a couple, so this is way too much risk for them. For the firms that are running their own models, you can run active or draft versions of those models. You can also leverage our partner store to subscribe to models from like First Trust, American Funds, BlackRock. I think there's like 25 total partners in there that there is no additional cost to that. They're just making their standard models available. You can also use our discovery feature, which again, for time's sake, I'll skip today, but is our screening capability to help you build the best portfolios you can. So just to jump back for a second, again, they want to be a 63. They're invested like an 84. Now, this riskalized GPA is very important because it talks about the efficiency of the portfolio on the other end. And in this case, it's getting a B- on the scale because that's an 84. It's pretty high on that 1 to 99 scale. But this return, this annual range midpoint's barely above 4%. That's not a lot of return for the amount of risk that this portfolio is carrying. And the proposal that I've got lined up for them not only has way lower risks, it's within the risk tolerance that they have at a 58, but also has a higher GPA, and that's because it's got better return and higher dividend and lower expense ratio. And by the way, advisory fees are added into that calculation as well, meaning this is a better, higher grade, more efficient portfolio. And this portfolio I have here is actually just a BlackRock portfolio that I took from the partner store. You can use this to click through, and opening up more data for each individual investment. For any firms that are on the call today that use like a Morningstar Advisor Workstation or any of the, kind of more detailed looks at portfolios, we have that too. We just purposely keep it a click away because not everybody needs to see things like trailing return and max drawdown, but we calculate tax drag, modeled performance, choose timeframes up to June 2004. Beta, R squared, batting average, Sharpe ratio. Again, we don't shy away from the data. We just keep it, again, a click away so that you can make the simplest proposal that you can. So diversification, asset class map, that sort of thing. To put a bow on this, again, we showed them a portfolio proposal that is more in line with their risk tolerance and it has a higher return. Now let's use this short retirement map, again, as very light financial planning to be able to show them that, all right, today you have a 64% probability of success with your current portfolio. And you want to invest your 900 grand, save 5,000 bucks a month until you retire in 29, and then pull out that same 5,000 when you retire. Some of the assumptions are captured from the questionnaire too. Birth year, life expectancy, inflation rate, annual savings increase are helping to drive this calculation. It's very, very light. So if I wanted to say, hey, what if we did 2028, right? And I press enter, the probability changes in less than a second. So let's go back to 29. And I've got some events on this timeline as well. College and inheritance kicking in for 250,000, buying a vacation home, Social Security kicking in. These things are very quickly added using this plus button right here. maybe we're not feeling super confident about this inheritance rolling in either at all or at this amount. I'm just going to click on the eyeball and turn this off. And now that 64%, it's only 27% with their current portfolio. Well, let's at least show them what happens if we move them forward with the proposal we made. All right, that's looking better. It's 66. And hey, if that inheritance does come in, we're sitting pretty here at 93. Again, very, very light. This is not going to eat your e-money, your Money Guide Pro, those sorts of things. This is going to be more along the lines of, again, a launching point to something more comprehensive. Lastly, as a way to work with this throughout the firm, we have dashboards for firm executives to make sure that the operational excellence is being adhered to. So things like being able to see, all right, when was the last time we sent a questionnaire to somebody? Has it been confirmed? What percentage of our clients have completed questionnaires? That can be handled here on the proposals dashboard. We also have a compliance dashboard. So looking through the lens of, do we have accounts aligned with the investment objective that we set when we opened that account? So it's a way to self-audit your book so that you're spending your time, your valuable time, on things that actually matter instead of spot checking accounts that are actually already aligned. And then lastly is insights. So we're a growth platform, and you should be able to track that growth. You should be able to measure that. And so with insights, you'll be able to compare yourself not only to yourself from, say, a month ago, a quarter ago, a year ago, but also against firms in your same AUM bucket, and compare your risk number, your range, and your client sentiment by advisor, your average portfolio cost, heck, even stress tests. So like 2013 or 2008 or financial crisis, if those were to happen, how would our firm's book, the entire book, what would the estimated performance be, so that you can make informed decisions and, you know, adjust your business continuity plan using actual math and your actual holdings to see, again, what the estimated performance would be. That's the quick version. I know Kathy's got a great demo coming up here too, so I'll stop my share and hand it over.
All right, thank you, Alex.
Thank you.
I'm going to share my screen. So as you guys know, we've had just a really nice conversation around what's happening from an operation perspective. So once I share my screen, and that should have popped up, you should see George and Sally here with those risk numbers that Alex talked about. So I'm going to take us on a journey from an operational perspective and really talk about that operational life cycle. So as a firm, as you think about where that growth is coming from and the status of those new clients, you know, you want to know where that growth is coming from, and then of course what's happening with those pending clients. So when we think about that growth piece of it, I'm going to talk about just briefly the growth dashboard and then some of the digital onboarding tools that we have in the portfolio management side. So as you guys know, I think some of you guys know this, we have just an amazing growth really plan for you. So as you're taking your prospects all the way through that cycle, you're going to be able to track all of that right here on the business development dashboard. What's really great, the net about any of the dashboards that we have on the CRM side is that they're configurable. So you get to choose what widgets you want to see. You can have as many dashboards as you want to. You can share those amongst your organization. And really, even in each of the widgets, when you want to see more information, first of all, you've got filters on the side, and then of course you can do a deeper dive and really get granular with the data. And of course, on the right-hand side, you'll see I can even open it up into another area to really do any kind of sorting that I want to there. Now, as you also think about what's happening from as you're onboarding those clients, you know, you want to, when you start with that growth piece of it, so once you get that yes, really it's just now a matter of, you know, okay, great, now the clients you're excellent. Well, that's only the beginning of that relationship, because of course you now need to take them from the yes, I want to be your client, to actually being a client. And this is where you're going to track all of that, because what you're really working towards is getting them onboarded and getting them funded as quickly as possible. So when you think about this dashboard where I can see all of my opportunities, I can see where everybody is, I can actually track where we are with accounts that are opened, and you can do all of that tracking. Now, I don't have a whole lot of time to go into some details, but just know that, with our account opening process, we can help you onboard clients in minutes with your custom questionnaire, or if you're using something from Nitrogen, your custom models. We've got some intuitive workflow already built in for you. And those opening requirements are dictated, by the custodian. And so what our workflow does is it really just ensures that all of that essential information is collected, really helping to prevent some of that human error that leads to those NIGOs and that extra work. So just know we've got you covered from that perspective. Now, as you think about the next step, so great, I had a prospect, now they're officially my client. So what are we doing here? So obviously we have a client portal. That portal is going to really allow, as a firm, you guys get to brand that. You're going to be able to utilize your color scheme, your templates, really throughout that entire portal. From an advisor level as well, you can actually deliver client portals for each advisor while making sure that you're maintaining a consistent branding as you're going through all that. And then, of course, on that client level, the firm can really, you guys get to control that client experience. What can they see? What can they do? And so you're going to get to see an overview of all of those asset allocations. You can receive notifications there. The client can see all of their documents. So they're going to be able to pop right in, and they can also transfer funds. So you can turn this off, you can turn it on, and really being able to access all of that data right here in the client portal. On the right-hand side, you'll see that you can set up your advisor profile with some notifications. The client can even aggregate their outside accounts here. So as I scroll down, they can add new items. They can manually add some other assets. And then, of course, they can decide if they want to link different institutions here too. They'll be able to see all of their documents. So a lot of these documents can be pushed right over from the performance management, which we're going to talk about here in a few minutes. And of course, then being able to turn on or turn off this transfer area. For some firms, this makes a lot of sense for your client to be able to kind of do some requests and manage that here. And some of you would prefer they just come to you directly. So just know that in all of these areas, there's some configuration settings that you guys get to set up there. So as we think about our friend Furman, who is our client, you're going to be able to see all of that investment. So I'm going to click over. We have an amazing connection between the CRM and portfolio management. As you guys know, we have some other amazing partners out there as well. So I'm specifically talking just about our offering here. So here we are on Furman's, on the household record. And so from here, I can just see a lot of different detail. I can see all of their managed holdings. I can see non-managed. I can see transactions. I don't have time to go through the breadth of this today. So just know there's several tabs that go across that's going to house all of that information. So essentially, we're going to present that performance data. You're going to be able to see as the advisor all the things that your client is seeing on their portal. So if they ever call in with questions, you are going to easily be able to say, okay, great, you're going to be able to pop right in here and see exactly what the client is seeing so you can answer any of those questions that come up. Now, as we're kind of talking through the client portal piece, obviously you're also going to be managing some of your orders, maybe some of the rebalancing tools. So I'm going to just show you this briefly here. So when I click on the rebalancing here, this system is really going to present to you all the areas in the firm's book that need attention and allow you to produce all those, the necessary trade recommendations. There's a lot to this part, so I won't go into all of it, but just some of the features that we offer here. So this is that analysis piece where we're going to give you those recommendations. But if you think about other features that your firm might want to take advantage of, so things around tax optimization, like your tax lot selection, maybe that tax loss harvesting, and of course, cash management, all of those timings. So in each of these areas, when I click on this, you'll see, so for your cash management, you can add in your parameters here, any security constraints. So, your securities, positions, so some of those things, you're going to see all of that here And we have an amazing onboarding team as well that's going to help you through all of this. We're going to help you get all of those set up. So again, we have a ton of features in this area specifically that we can definitely walk through with you one-on-one. So now that you have, so we've gone down this road, and so we have taken them through our prospect process. We have gotten them on their client portal. We're managing their investments. So now how are we making sure that we're spending the right time with the right clients, and with all of the tasks that come with that, how are we staying on track? So as you think about that, we have an operations view here. And for those of you, I saw some names on here. Some of you are already using our amazing dashboards. And as you know, we have some other really neat enhancements coming along to this. But this is where you're going to be able to see everything that's happening with the firm. I can see all of my action items here. If I want to drill down and see what folks are specifically have worked on or are working on, I can easily do that drill down here. And then, of course, I can see my upcoming client reviews. Again, the dashboard feature, this just really allows you to add as many widgets as you want to and really just track all of that from the dashboard perspective. Now, of course, Furman's a gold level client. We also want to make sure that we are delivering the value that we have promised our client. So with our service monitor in the workflow drop down here, I can see everything we've done for the client. I can see all the workflow they're engaged with, all those recurring actions. And then the service monitor, which I can obviously see per client, but I can also get a global view of everything that's happening in my service monitor. So from here, I just have this set for my gold clients, and now I can make sure that everybody is getting all of the services. So just really quickly, you're able to make sure that you're taking care of all those folks. And of course, then we have to end with the business operations. So when you think about the next steps after that, so I've onboarded my client, we're making sure that we're in constant communication, but of course we want to make sure that we are taking care of our fees. So our billing engine is configurable, of course, and so you can actually set up your fee schedules. You can actually add in your exclusions and your discounts. You can create your billing households, all of that set up. This is really a really nice kind of set it and forget it situation. And then once you have everything set up, being able to then, of course, track all of that. So we've made it really easy for you guys in operations and advisors, because now you can see all the details, you can see everything, how everything is calculated. You can actually see that billing data whenever you want to. Now, we've actually created a few reports here as well. I'm not going to click on all of them, but a few of them I definitely want to highlight for you before I turn my time back over to Suleiman. So as you think about some things that are really necessary, so this cash shortages report is probably one of our more popular reports. Any given time, you can click in here and make sure that that cash is available for, and see if you have to raise any cash before executing your billing. And of course, your account fee collection report. So this is going to tell you exactly all the math that was used to calculate that fee. So this can be, difficult sometimes with different systems to really be able to see that. And so we've really just put a nice program together here for you to see that. And then one more I'll show you is the payee report. So this is, we can calculate those advisor payouts for you as well. And you can account for any of your splits and your exclusions and your discounts as well. And then, of course, you can actually see over any time period that you need to. Now, if you're sending out invoices to your clients, you can send those out from Advisor Engine. Those can be branded. You can send it right over to the portal. Very easy. Again, we're going to help you with that setup. You can run them all as one PDF as well for storage, and it also gives you the ability to kind of take a quick peek if you want to do some spot checking for that too. And then, of course, on this intelligence dashboard is going to show you everything across your entire business. So this is going to show you your goals. You can actually really see your net new assets here. I can track AUM by advisor. We have some firms that are using this dashboard now for, their maybe quarterly, semi-annual business reviews versus having to always rely on spreadsheets and PowerPoint presentations. So I think that really speaks to a lot of the work that our team has done. We take all the feedback from our clients, and make sure that we try to get all of that incorporated for you. Now, obviously, I wasn't able to show you everything today, but I sure want to. So definitely keep me top of mind when you're ready to have further conversation. And Suleiman, I will turn it back over to you to close this out.
Thank you, Kathy. Thank you so much for presenting the demo. We're just at time here, so for folks who are still with us on the call, thank you so much. I just wanted to leave with one thing here. Take out your phone right now if you've got it. Turn your camera on and point it at the screen at these different QR codes. These are the series continues. So on September 14th, we will have a session on client experience. And I would strongly suggest that if you're in ops and you know folks in the RMs and people who work directly with clients, to strongly suggest for them to attend. We've got a great lineup for that. And then on the 27th, we're bringing together CEO of Nitrogen, Aaron Klein, and Rich Cancro, CEO of Advisor Engine, to have a very high-level discussion. So please pass that on to any of the CEOs that you know in your field and amongst your colleagues. I wanted to thank again John, Nick, and Craig for joining the discussion today and sharing their insights. We covered a lot of ground. I really appreciate the time that you guys gave for today's discussion. And I want to thank all of the attendees as well for coming today to today's webinar. We hope that we'll see you again on the 14th and on the 27th.